Hello, I'm Jack from Dusty Gems, and today I wanted to talk about something different on my channel. I've always wanted to talk about this book, but I never had a really good reason to talk about it before. And I felt like now that I'm trying to grow this channel, I thought instead of just talking about things that other people are talking about, I want to talk more about things that I'm passionate about. Something that I really love is a book called Antkind by Charlie Kaufman, my favorite screenwriter and probably my favorite writer. He is amazing. I have the hardcover version. I don't know, the hardcover version, and I also have the paperback in case I want to take it around, because the hardback was a bit too much to carry around, but you know, paperback just as good. I'll just talk about why I love this novel so much. I love it because it's like everything that I love about Synopsis, New York, my favorite movie. It's like every kind of dreamlike and every dream logic idea that he had in that is within Antkind, but it's so much more. And I feel like he has such a free range to do whatever he wants in the novel, and it's such a great character study, and there's so much stuff to look up because it's packed with so much references and different things that just the main character brings up, and also the little Kaufmanisms of things that happen early on that come back into play and aren't just throwaway lines. There's a lot of that, but in my opinion this is way more subtle than in his films. It's as I was researching this, I just found there was just so much that I missed. I feel like I wasn't really reading the book till I was actually dissecting it. It's almost I'm only seeing what's on the surface, but once I have a knife, I'm able to cut into it and see what's actually there, which is there's a lot. And this is what I wanted to talk about in this video essay, and I'm gonna do my best. I'm not a very good speaker. I say a lot of ums, so the editing is a bit junky, but I'm gonna try my best to communicate what is in this book while going through the plot and giving a summary, while also just exploring what the little hidden meanings, and then also giving some context and little bits of brief inspections on things that the B. Rosenberg mentions in the novel. So without further ado, I will get into it. There are two quotes before the novel opens. It is so American, fire, so like us. Its desolation and its eventful brief triumph. Larry Levis, my story in a late style of fire. And the second, smoke gets in your eyes, smoke gets in your eyes, smoke gets in your eyes, smoke gets in your eyes. These are lyrics from a famous piece of music that has been covered by numerous African-American musicians, written by Jerome Kern, a Jewish man who was known for writing jazz music in shows, some of which were minstrel shows. It lands with a thunk. From nowhere, out of time, out of order, thrown from the future or perhaps the past, but landing here, in this place, at this moment, which could be any moment, which means you guess it's no moment. It appears to be a film. What a great opening to a novel. It makes you already want to learn more of what is going to happen in the novel. What is the film? Is it literally falling from the sky or figuratively? So much you want to learn and explore. We haven't even gotten into the bite of the novel yet. The novel leads into a title. Herbert and Dunham ride bicycles. 1896. Two brothers go out on bikes and discover a fish monster, which they describe as a half fish, half octopus, half ant-like creature. They both discuss whether or not it's a spook, ghost, but agree there is no such thing. One of them says it could be like Jonah from the Jewish Bible, but the other boy doesn't understand what he means. He explained it could be like Jonah was swallowed by a fish then spat out, but this monster looks like God gotten a giant human to swallow him up and spit him out. The story of Jonah is found in the book of Jonah and is a biblical book that does belong to the Jewish faith. The story goes that he was swallowed by a giant fish, which some speculate was actually a whale. This relates to Antkind, and I will explain better in the next mixed parts of this video essay. The other boy doesn't understand and they decide to hook the thing up to their bikes and take it to the town doctor. The monster is too heavy for the bikes and both boys fall into a ditch trying to get it there. Not sure if they should leave it or not, but they decide to go see the doctor first anyway. The doctor's name is Doc Webb. They tell him about the sea monster from the Jew Bible, and the doctor tells them he will have a look tomorrow as he doesn't have time, and then he goes off to do his other duties for the day. As the boys leave, one of them says to the other, "What if that mound of stuff was us?" The other boy asks, "How?" "Like, say there was many of us. Of you and me?" He explains that maybe it was two of them as babies traveling back in time, and as they traveled back they had gotten mangled and squished together into a monstrosity, like the one the boys had found. "You and me?" the other boy asks. "Just a notion. It makes a fellow wonder." This is the only time we see these two boys. I will come back to them as both of them do play a bigger role in the novel, but there is a lot of text that I need to provide to be able to explain what their role in the novel plays. The novel then introduces us to the main protagonist in the first person perspective, B. Rosenberg, a film critic journalist who is sent to Florida to write a piece on A Florida's Enchantment, which is a real film made in the 20s and is regarded as one of the first transgender films ever made. B has no hair on his head, but a beard that he compares to Whitman, Rasputin, and Darwin. B tells the reader that his beard is in fashion and that to not like his beard is conformist and narrow-minded. This, already you can see that B is both insecure and self-righteous in defending his identity. This is only the start of B's insecurities and defensive rants. B explains that his outfit isn't conformist, that he came to his own conclusions, that he likes it because of his own tastes, that he got his outfit because of his famous sitcom actress girlfriend, who you would know, he tells the reader, had gotten him into bike riding and yoga. He goes on to explain that they met at a book signing for his biography of a great artist, but as he explains, he's interrupted by something dashing in front of his car on his drive to Florida. He doesn't know what it was and thinks it may have been a deer, but that he doesn't know if there are deer in Florida. He wonders to himself if there are deer with fangs in Florida. He looks it up later, but whatever it was long gone. He drives through St. Augustine, telling the reader of places where his mind wanders. Bugs hit onto his windshield. This reminds him of his girlfriend, who he reminds the reader that you would recognize if you knew her name. But his thoughts of her are interrupted by a much larger splatter, which he sees on the windshield, and appears to be a much larger bug this time. He is distracted by his thoughts of Whole Foods and Amazon, and then tells the reader that his current girlfriend is what ended his last relationship, and explains to the reader that she is an African-American actress, and that he is surprised that she would find any interest in him at all. They met because of his book on William Greaves, an African-American filmmaker. William Greaves was best known for his experimental film he made called Symbiocytoplasm, a film that is about the making of a film that would never get made. It's a meta experience where you can't tell what's going on, and it feels like a character study on Greaves himself and his artistic style. You can also find the booklet for the Criterion edition of the film and find that Greaves wrote, "The film is about fire, which is all around us," which relates to the opening quotes of Antkind, and also that what ends up happening to Ingo's film. B tells the reader that he's never had erections or attractions to another woman like his new girlfriend, but feels insecure about his penis size, and has intrusive thoughts that his is being compared to who he would presume are African-American ex-partners. He tells her this, and she explains to him that he needs to check his privilege and not to think in stereotypes. The next paragraph of the novel begins with, "Tell me how it begins." This seems random and not cohesive, but I'll explain once further into the novel how this plays out. B describes himself driving and paints the scene as dark and rural. He mentions that Dunkin' Donuts make the best coffee and Starbucks make the smart coffee for stupid people, the Christopher Nolan of coffee, and that Dunkin' Donuts is like the great work of Judd Apatow, who is also a Jewish writer and filmmaker. Something else that is interesting is B's liking of Dunkin' Donuts, which is something he spots in Ingo's miniature city, but I'll get to that later. His pulse is racing fast and he hears a preacher on the radio. "You will keep on hearing but not understand, and you will keep on seeing but not perceive." Bugs continue to hit his windshield. He turns off the preacher and listens to the sound of his car. Might not be relevant, but it is funny to me that he is listening to a preacher just as he was talking about Dunkin' Donuts, which was found on the set of Ingo's film. And Ingo is religious and preachy himself, but this might not be something relevant to the novel, but it is a funny idea. He pulls over to a fast food restaurant called Slammys. He describes the scene as the middle of nowhere and the restaurant is empty. He enters the restaurant in look of paper towels to wipe the bugs off his his windshield. He goes to the restroom but finds that they have no tissues in there. He asks the lady working behind the register for some, but she tells him he has to purchase something. B points out that she is African American to the reader and that he really wants her to like him. He wants her to like him because he is worried she will perceive him as Jewish, despite not being Jewish himself, and feels there is a tension between the Jewish community and the black community. He pulls out his wallet to pay for the drink he ordered in hopes that the picture of his African American girlfriend will validate that he is not a racist for the fact that she is African American herself. This does not. She tells him they do not take cards, so he proceeds to pay in cash. He asks for some paper and water, and as he asks, another worker pops their head out to look at B, then disappears again. He asks the girl if she knows who William Greaves is. The man from before pops his head out once again. B tells her to never mind and he leaves hurt. The moment he exits the restaurant, the door is locked and the interior lights turn off and a neon sign reading closed appears. B wipes off the bugs with water and tissue but finds it to be useless and uses his shirt instead. He removes one of them and finds it's a lot bigger and more weird looking than the other bugs. He ponders if it is a Florida thing or perhaps the government is sending out drones to spy on him. He sees that the inner part of the insect is still alive and squishes it to death in his t-shirt. B wonders if perhaps it was a fellow critic, Armand White or Mahala Dargis. B pulls the bug from his shirt and examines it. To a bony skeleton within, he is disgusted by this and confused as to how that could be possible. He suspects that this is for sure the work of Armand White. B drives off, drinking his cola, finding it tastes better than he expected. B tells the reader that he would drive home after Thanksgiving with his wife, with her asking for a divorce, but would shortly change her mind. The only time she went through with it was once she learned of him and his new girlfriend. He explains to the reader that he met his girlfriend at a book signing of his biography of William Greaves. He left his name ambiguous in the print so people wouldn't know he was white. He remembers a conversation he had with her, explaining that he has a distant relative who was a Nazi. "You look Jewish," she tells him. He explains that he is not and asks her out for coffee. B explains to the reader that he feels he is being watched all the time, that his life is being seen by unseen forces. He drives by the sea and blows the drone from his shirt out of the Slammys straw. The sea makes him feel lonely. He arrives to St. Augustine and thinks about how many tourists visit Disney parks. B calls his girlfriend and tells the reader that she has landed a role in a big movie from a movie director that you would know. She answers the phone to him with, "Hey B," and B explains to the reader that he decided for them both to only call each other by their first initials to keep their gender ambiguous. The call is short and he says that he loves her, and she reciprocates that and then tells him that she must go and that they'll talk soon. B feels she is being short and passive aggressive, but he doesn't want to point it out and tells her that he will call but in an aggressive tone. She just says, okay. B wonders if he was African American, would his girlfriend love him more? And if he was black, would the lady at Slammys like him and perhaps sleep with him? He becomes aroused by this idea and then loses the arousal once he sees himself in the mirror and sees himself for who he is on the outside. Bald, scrawny, long-wieldy grey beard, glasses, hook nose, Jewish looking. B arrives at the apartment he is renting and remembers a review he had read on TripAdvisor about the place and thinks about the author and whether or not they were man, woman or trans, and explains to the reader that his favourite term for trans people is thon. He explains that it's the best term you can use in regard to those things. He also prefers to talk about himself in the third person rather than the first. B meets the super of the apartment and is handed a note by him stating that he is deaf and that he can read lips but must know what accent he is speaking in. B hands him back a note saying American. B tells him his name and that he's here for the apartment. The man understands. B then experiments by mouthing the question back to him without actually saying the words, to which the man answers without question. Then B tries again this technique, but then is asked, "Why are you only mouthing the words?" "How do you know?" B asks. "You weren't breathing when speaking." B finds this interesting and decides to work on his breathing while not speaking aloud. B gets comfortable in the apartment and is pleased with the bathroom, while telling the reader that it's hard to find a decent bathroom in this ordeal. B gets into bed, sat up on the back, and practices his mouthing technique, and finds that he makes a little whisper sounds while doing so. He thinks back about his childhood and tells the reader that he was an average student, no prodigy, and that he was never sexually abused or talent scouted at a mall while with his mother. He was never given a note by a girl he liked. The closest to ever getting a note was from a girl he ranked as second tier. B practices more of his breathing technique and finds smoke exhaling from his nostrils. He doesn't remember lighting a cigarette and tells the reader that he had quit 5 months ago. ago. He admits that it tastes good, but quitting was difficult. The last cigarette he consciously remembers smoking was when Jerry Garcia died, a fellow smoker who died of a heart attack, and the other last cigarette was when Dean Martin died from lung cancer. B has a dream set in a hospital where they are showing him new noses he could have. He is given options from labeled photos: pug, button, Roman, green, African American, Japanese. He tells the doctor that he doesn't know which one to pick and asks if the African American nose is different from the African American nose. He realizes that within his dream he had been calling actors in his girlfriend's movie African American, despite them being from different countries. He wonders if she has ever heard him aloud and that he is a terrible racist. He asks the doctor why he needs a new nose and why he must lie. The doctor tells B that it's been scheduled and it will be a hardship for many people if B cancels. B agrees and the doctor makes a pen mark on his nose. B walking now in the woods. A German shepherd runs towards B and he tenses up. The dog is followed by a woman running towards them, calling B, which turns out to be the dog's name. B is upset that the woman didn't apologize and sarcastically tells her, "Thank you for that," but the woman walks past him without acknowledgement. B calls her a cunt under his breath, and he wonders why the woman didn't like him, and he thinks of all the possibilities with his appearance that could have made her not like him. B thinks about the fact that the dog had the same name as him, and is certain that she would love him if he was a dog himself. He sits down on a bench and finds a woodpecker on a tree near him. He stares at the bird and says hello, but the woodpecker moves himself to the far end of the tree. B drives to the Film History Center in St. Augustine, resembles Spanish architecture, and the creature from the Black Lagoon, which is what St. Augustine is most famous for in cinema history. Also, B going inside the monster to do his research on the film relates to parts of the novel where Book of Jonah is mentioned, and B being swallowed by a whale later on in the novel. He meets a woman who works there, and she tells him that she expected him to be a woman. He tries to explain himself, but she interrupts him and leads him to where the archives are located, the chin of the creature. B sits in the archive room. He starts his research on transgendered cinema, referencing a silent film titled A Florida Enhancement, which is to be believed one of the earliest documents of bisexual and transgender cinema, which B is hired to write about. After a while, B checks his email and Facebook and is saddened that no one has reached out to him via email or Facebook. He writes in his journal, "Dear Diary, I am 58 years old today and no one has sent me an email. My girlfriend may be shooting there and there is a significant time difference, so I am not at this moment without hope. Only 43 Facebook happy birthdays. An average of Facebook happy birthdays is 79 and I am down to 36. The age of Jesus when he died, plus 3. Coincidence? I feel alone." B in his thoughts tells the reader that gender is a crime against humanity and that he thinks Hitler would be proud of how we restrict people's gender identities. B believes if he didn't restrict his children by their gender assigned at birth, that they wouldn't resent him, and that if he had any more children now, he would only refer to them as they. B is displeased with his brother for not wishing him a happy birthday on Facebook and tells the reader that despite him having a full head of hair, he has never had an African American girlfriend, never sexually explored himself because he is narrow-minded. B distracts himself from how he feels by delving more into the research that he's doing himself. He wonders why people would be so upset by one's own identity. Why would people chase the man from A Florida Enchantment? He points out the film itself has its own shortcomings by casting white people, then putting them in blackface to portray African American characters. B finds himself with a cigarette in his hand again, not knowing how it got there, and feeling embarrassed since it would be obvious you can't smoke in a library archive. B takes a break to list the words he wants to include in his piece. This list reminds me of the notes Williams Greaves made for himself. He may be trying to be more like Greaves since he is a big admirer of him. Back at the apartment, B continues writing his piece, but hears his neighbor yelling, fucking fuck, you fucking little bastard, you sheeny-like little fucker, do what I tell you to." B is offended by this and wants to call the police, but he is worried it is rude as he has just moved in and doesn't want to be misidentified as a Jewish person, just sticking up for another Jewish person, as B is not Jewish himself. B hears another scream from his neighbor, "Fuck you, Hebrew." B grabs his key and goes to investigate this screaming. He knocks on the neighbor's door. A very old man answers. "Oh, it's you," the old man says. B asks if everything is alright and asks if there is a Jewish person in there at the end of this abuse. The old man tells him he is alone and explains that he is in fact talking to B. B explains to him that he is not Jewish, and the old man tells him that he knows and that they are glad they have worked it out now. B is confused and annoyed to be mistaken again as Jewish. The old man tells him that he is lonely. B in a familiar place of all people wanting his companionship. He tries to leave the conversation by telling him he has work to do on a film he is writing about. The old man then states, a Florida enchantment? B asks how he could know that. The old man tells them that he was the little boy in the movie, and that his name is in the credits as Ingo Cutbirth. B tells the old man that there is no little boy in the film. Ingo tells B that he was underneath the camera, and the film is from his point of view. B tells the reader that this is genius, and he finally realizes the true intent of the film. B asks how old he was in the film. 6, which would mean that Ingo was born in 1908. He tells B that he had lived through both wars, and that he knew when both would happen because the Germans are nothing but punctual. B asks him how he could possibly see into the future. B asks him if he had read his book on mustard. Ingo tells him he's not much of a foodie. B corrects him, saying that he meant the film Mordard. Ingo tells him that he has it on his nightstand. Really? B asks. Of course, says Ingo. Why of course? B discovers that he is a fellow cinephile, and they have a short misunderstanding on the term cinephile, as Ingo thought it meant the sexual attraction to film stock, which he also says that he is in fact guilty of. B's mind wanders off, and he feels guilty about the fact that he finds old people repulsive. He begins to not know how long he has been standing in Ingo's doorway. Ingo asks B if he would like to come in. B declines, telling him that he is busy. B feels guilty about declining and worries that the same will happen to him because of karma. He tells Ingo that he has errands, and Ingo tells him it's okay. He just doesn't understand why he was staring at him for so long, which shows that B gets lost in his thoughts more than he realizes. I envy you young people, your fake states and real eye bracelets, your eye bobs, Ingo says. B doesn't understand what he means and asks him to explain. Ingo explains that he gets ahead of himself. He has dreams. B notices that Ingo's face appears to have makeup on, white makeup, covering his black skin, which B states is whiteface. B asks him if he is African American. Ingo screams no at B and slams the door. B asks him to open the door, but Ingo tells him to leave him and calls him a Jewish slur. B shouts back, stating he is not Jewish. B tries to explain that his name is one letter away from Ringo, like Ringo Starr. He tells B to go away again. B goes back to his apartment to write a poem to publish on his blog. Home. Finally home, suddenly home, never home, always home, without home, going home, goodbye home, broken home, leaving home, oh home, where did you go, oh homo, oh. B notes that he wonders if how cultures without the word home live. He waits for comments and discussion to break out in the comments section, but nothing comes. B goes back to Ingo's apartment door, and he opens the door, this time without the white makeup on his face. B can also see that Ingo is African American. I mean you no harm, B tells Ingo. He says nothing. I mean you no harm, he tells him again, but louder this time. Ingo shows his gums to B briefly. B tells Ingo that he had written a monograph on William Greaves, but this doesn't engage with Ingo. B tells him that he also has an African American girlfriend, but this doesn't work neither, and Ingo closes the door on him. Back at his apartment, B watches from his peephole, looking for Ingo to leave or show his face. He thinks of a bunch of scenarios in which he would have to knock on his door to talk to him again. Perhaps a trivial question that could be something that neighbors talk about all the time to get his engagement. Ingo steps out of the apartment and into the hall, and so does B. B asks him if he remembers who he is from the other day. B suggests to him since they are neighbors they should exchange keys in case of an emergency, but Ingo stays silent, staring at B. As Ingo goes to walk down the stairs, he falls down them. As B gets down to the bottom, he sees the deaf landlord run for him to help. B screams, telling him that he can take him to the hospital, but alas, he cannot hear him. So B grabs his arm with his new breathing mouthing technique and tells him that he'll take Ingo. He gives Ingo to B, and B takes him to the hospital. In the car, B tries to engage with him again with facts about how he is not racist for having an African American girlfriend. He also talks about how he did not push him down the stairs, shrieking at him. Ingo finally responds with, and he went up from thence unto Bethel, and he was going up by the way, and there came forth little children out of the city, and mocked him, and said unto him, Go up, thou bald head, go up, thou bald head. B is stunned by Ingo for quoting the Bible from nowhere, and he thinks he may be mocking or threatening B. At the hospital, while Ingo looked at his Medicare card, B had put himself down as his emergency contact, and he was asked if he was his son by a nurse. B found this validating and became excited to tell his girlfriend later. Back in the car, Ingo becomes more engaged with talking to B. With permission, B starts recording the conversation. B asks him his age and why it was written down differently than on his hospital form, and it appears that Ingo is a lot older than he had previously stated. Ingo tells B that he can see into the future, and they have a thing called Brainio, a device which helps you look into the future. B asks him if he has this also. Ingo tells him that he can't because he is dead in the future. B asks him what he did for a living, and Ingo tells him he used to work as a janitor at a school school for the deaf and blind, and that he's never had time for a girlfriend, and that he has always liked the deaf and blind for they don't judge a person based on senses. B asks him if he writes stories, and Ingo tells B that he's been working on a film. B grows excited and asks him if anyone else has seen it. Ingo tells him no one except himself has seen it. This excites B, and he starts to think of all the praise he will get for introducing the world to a reclusive outsider African American artist. B gets to go inside Ingo's apartment and see what's in there. There he finds the apartment looks not much different from his own apartment, but with the inclusion of boxes filled with newspapers and labeled buildings, storm clouds, and the unseen. A lot of boxes, B said to him, hoping that it will expand on this question, but no answer. B asks if it's okay if he could go through the boxes, and Ingo replies with another Bible verse. Is that a yes? B asks him to that. He stares, and B decides best not to. B sees a room ajar and peeps in, seeing a miniature city with even a little Dunkin' Donuts. He asks Ingo if he can see it. Ingo stares again. B says, maybe later. Back in B's apartment, he tries to find Bible verses that could relate to letting a man see another man's film, but finds nothing. B messages an old friend asking if he knows of any Bible verses that could help him. B tells the reader that he had a falling out with his friend because B told him that the Bible was full of garbage, and that as an atheist he was obligated to tell him that. B bangs on Ingo's door and asks if he can do his shopping for him. Ingo sighs, lets him in with a list of groceries that he needs. B asks Ingo, so what would you say to that little New York City street scene in there? Ingo replies with, nothing is covered up that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. Therefore, whatever you have said in the dark shall be heard in the light, and you have whispered in private rooms shall be proclaimed on the housetops. Luke 12:2-3. On the way to the supermarket, B lists of possible conflicts the filmmakers have to talk about in a film. Man versus man, woman, non-binary, child. Man versus self, man versus nature, man versus society, man versus machine, man versus supernatural, man versus goddess, man versus two men, and etc. Man versus everything, man versus nothing. Man versus a few things, man versus disease, man (sick) versus healthy person of any gender, man versus idiocy, man versus memory. Memory is a map of sorts, but hand-drawn, incomplete, and full of errors. It can let you know a place exists, but you cannot trust it to get you there. And to get you there, you need a computer. A computer is precise. A computer does not think that your mother is more important than the chair, or the space that's not your mother's and is more important than the space that is, or the glass on the top of the table, or the sun pouring through the window, or the velvet drapes, or your mother's love for her father, or the front stoop, or the cracks in the front stoop. This is why man must fight it. Note that B is sure in his notes that memory is unreliable, not to be trusted, which plays into the novel since B trusts his own memory will be able to remember Ingo's film once it is destroyed. B goes back to Ingo's apartment with groceries and drops them off, thinking that maybe he'll ask B not to go, but Ingo stays put and doesn't ask for B. B goes back to his apartment and watches from the peephole to see if he'll pop his head out to see him, but he doesn't. B tries to get back to work on his current project, but can't help himself but think about Ingo's film, thinking that he may have found something special in Ingo. B gets a call from an unknown number and hears that it's Ingo. Ingo tells B that he actually saw his film and thought the critics were wrong about it. B, flattered, asked if it was Gravity in Essence for confirmation. Ingo confirms it was. Ingo tells B that he is a filmmaker also. B tells him that he knew that already. Ingo then says that he has his reasons for not wanting to show anyone, and that the reasons will come to be told. I can tell you this, no man is one thing, only a fool believes that, and a fool is not only one thing either, but sometimes a fool is the wisest of men. If one does not understand a person, one tends to regard him as a fool, Carl Jung said. B starts to realize how eccentric Ingo is and tells the reader that he is more like himself than he realized, Carl Jung also being mentioned by the boys at the start of Antkind. Ingo allows B to see his movie. In Ingo's apartment, he gets everything ready for B to view the movie. B waits excitedly. Ingo's film is a stop-motion piece, and B mentions a film to the reader which doesn't actually exist, titled Ich hab kein Auge, I Don't Have an Eyeball, by Henrik Tellermocher, also a fictional person, which B explains is one of the earliest stop motions ever made, from 1891. The film is about two eyeballs from a man's face and roll around for a long while on the floor. This relates also back to the start of the novel, where the two boys go to meet the doctor who helps the deaf and blind. The film starts playing and B begins to describe what he is seeing. A long jagged scratch, screen right on black leader, is my introduction to Ingo's au revoir. The line skips floats about merrily, then disappears, then reappears. It transforms into kind of a Morse code of dots and dashes, and then it is gone forever and replaced by the China girl. B continues describing what he sees to the reader and gives his analytical perspective to it. In the film, 2 children are born, both their names Momus and Zoizes, but are identified as Bud and Daisy. If you look up the meaning behind the name Momus, it is a Greek myth which is the personification of satire, and would later go on to be known as a critic of art, which is something that is telling of the themes of Antkind. If you look up Oases, also a Greek myth, but the personification of misery and depression. Is Charlie Kaufman trying to subtly tell the reader that there is a misery and depression in satire, and that this is the fate in which B is to face, as B himself is a critic and miserable? I like also that other names are Bud and Daisy, like flowers, the 2 things which you need to create life and flowers. Might be Kaufman saying that there is still life within these 2 Greek myths. Daisy is accidentally killed during a children's game, and B tells the reader that Bud likely suffers separation anxiety because of it. Mud grows older, and the title cards inform the viewer that Bud grows up to find a partner for his work, in which they title themselves Mud and Malloy. The screen goes black. B asks if there's more and how long the film is. Ingo tells him that the film is 3 months long, give or take. B tells Ingo that this is longer than the longest film ever documented, Shoah, which is a 9-hour documentary on the Holocaust. B tells Ingo that he wrote a piece on the film and asks if Ingo has read it. Ingo tells him that it's on his nightstand. B asks Ingo if his film has a title, and they have a miscommunication on what the film title is. But Ingo finally tells B that there is no title, but refers to it as his girlfriend, and adds, "The purpose of a movie title is to give the audience something to call it when they purchase tickets or talk about it with friends. It allows marketing departments a hook. It is to reduce the film to something bite-sized, manageable, understood." B tells Ingo that he himself likes titles for films as it helps the audience understand what they are watching. Ingo and them disagree, and Ingo quotes the Bible again. "I am the work of someone or something, and so are you. So God created man in his own image." Genesis 1:27. Ingo tells B that he intends on destroying the movie once they are both done viewing it, or if he passes before that point, he would appreciate if B took it upon himself to destroy the film. B nods but tells the reader that he has no intention whatsoever of destroying the film in that event, and that he will be the Max Brod to Kafka in that event. Kafka being a writer that Kaufman takes a lot of influence from, and like Ingo, wished for his work to be destroyed after he passed, but of course never happened. B tells Ingo that he will destroy the film, but once he has seen this film 7 times, as this is important for B's viewing experience, but might also be a ploy for him to prolong the time of its destruction in hopes that Ingo will pass in that time. B then explains to the reader that even watching a film upside down is important too, as when viewing Judd Apatow's This Is 40 upside down, he got a new experience from it, and that is close to genius. Ingo sorts out his medication while B goes off on a rant in his head, and comes back to him asking if he would like to watch the rest of the film. Ingo tells B that the film will be viewed in almost one sitting with lunch and bathroom breaks scheduled in, and sleep. Your psyche should be able to fill up those gaps as you fill in the blanks in your dreams, and for B not to use his bathroom, and that he is in charge of his own toiletry needs. The following 17 days pass, and between some hours of the last reel, Ingo dies. B tries to perform CPR on him, but doesn't bring him back. B weeps in his apartment. B pays for Ingo's funeral since Ingo has no next of kin. B returns to the apartment and thinks about the people that are going to enjoy and get a lot out of Ingo's film. B thinks about the laminated piece of paper that he has with him at all times, reading, "Criticism is the windows and chandeliers of art. It illuminates the enveloping darkness in which art might otherwise rest only vaguely indiscernible and perhaps altogether unseen. George Jean Nathan." Also that the person that B is quoting has had a failed play. Also the unseen is mentioned in this quote. B starts going through Ingo's boxes that he told him not to. B feels dirty while doing so, but proceeds anyway. He finds all the little sets and minor characters. One of the boxes only has one character, a beautiful young man about 25 years old, about 10 times larger. B wonders if he is perhaps a giant that never made it into the movie, but he puts him back. The giant doll might be a character that B later remembers, but I will come back to him later. B finds another box filled with notebooks and other things that Ingo kept. B opens the notebook and reads aloud, "We are hidden away, not just the Negro, but the insane, the infirm, the destitute, the vile,
the criminal. We are housed in slums, in jails, in institutions, in hobo jungles. We are all hidden away from view, leaving only the comedy of whiteness to be seen. My goal is to hold up a mirror to society, but a mirror can only see what can be seen. My camera is such a mirror but it doesn't mean the unseen ceases to exist. It's simply hidden away from the camera lens, and so I shall animate the unseen, as well as all the lives that come and go unnoticed. I shall animate them, remember them, and not record them. And as such, my camera shall be the truest of mirrors in this film, and this film shall reflect the world as no other. It is as with the blind children in my workplace, hidden away in an institution. They do not see, and we, the sighted, cannot bear to see them not seeing. It is unsightly. They remind us of our own vulnerability. If these unfortunate people walk among us, we cannot go on the human comedy unimpeded, and above all else, it is required that we do. Therefore, we must pretend in order that we may entertain. B closes the notebook and sits in silence for a while. He doesn't understand Ingo's note, but dismisses it, telling the reader that it is, of course, an outsider artist, and outsider artist is widely misunderstood. B wonders who the giant is, and then tells the reader that time will tell. B continues looking around the apartment and for more hidden things, but only finds a map with an X marked on it. B wonders if it is something in which Ingo had hidden and thinks about going to retrieve it with a pickaxe and shovel. B spends hours digging at the spot that Ingo had marked, and once down there finds boxes filled with puppets of all races and genders. B tries to call his girlfriend to tell her the news, but it goes to voicemail. He punches a wall and gets back to the film. B is now left to himself to change the film reels, and tells the reader that this is now his life's work, documenting Ingo's film, comparing that this will explode his head similar to the ant. B becomes excited by it all and masturbates. B calls his girlfriend again, but nothing. He punches the wall again. B calls his editor to tell him of his discovery. B chooses to make this phone call at St. Augustine Beach, where the monster long ago washed ashore, and there is a Henry Moore sculpture commissioned with a plaque written on it. At this location, on November 30, 1896, an unidentifiable creature dubbed the Monster of St. Augustine and later Globster washed up on the shore. The faceless, eyeless creature had stimulated the imaginations of biologists and ichthyologists alike ever since. What is the amorphous creature-like non-creature? This reeking, decaying mass, the corpulent, seemingly fatty monstrosity that it generates such intense speculation, that encourages such ludicrous projection as to its identity, as to its meaning. Might it be nothing more than a substance similar to the fatbergs that modern science speculates will very near future clog the sewers systems of our great cities? For what creature this has no brain, no muscles, no skeleton, no mouth, no anus? Our interest in this mass skeleton says more about ourselves than it does any mythical sea monsters. We are, it turns out, an odd, delusional species who search in the vein of meaning. It must be noted that there's no entity other than the human being, including the universe itself, asks why. Dr. Edward Cutchian-Tar. Upon inspection, B realizes that the sculpture is not designed by Henry Moore, but by Fernando Bartolo. B finally calls his editor. His editor asks him where he'd been, and B tells him that he has found the greatest film ever made. Not again, his editor replies. B tells him that he had found the best film ever made, and this one is different. The editor brushes it off and proceeds to ask B about the current project they sent him out there for. B tells him that it is garbage, and that Ingo's film is better. B starts explaining the film to his editor, and that the editor begins to grow more and more annoyed, and is annoyed that B would sidetrack away from the project he was paid to write. In the end, B convinces him to continue on Ingo's film. B starts to load the truck he rented with Ingo's film and puppets. B on his drive thinks about the Slammys that he had been in, and that he will finally have the approval he was seeking. He also thinks about how people will react to his finding, quoting, "Let's face it, animals make noise, they demand attention, they make more noise than vegetables, which in turn, that make more noise than minerals. The animals, especially the humans, are inherently dramatic. They are not more important, but believe they are. This is something one learns immediately when one studies luminous. Classification is just that. There is no hierarchy. Every element is weighted exactly the same. Exactly a simple analogy would be to try and determine which part of a ball is most important. There is no answer because of the question. It makes no sense. You might think it is unfair that the humans get the most attention regarding the screamers, the squeaky wheel, and the grease, but you have to ask, unfair to whom? The human is part of the ball that gets the attention. The human is part of the ball that hits the ground first in a bounce, but it is the whole ball that deforms. Rebecca D. Marcus, solving for X. B parks up the van man in the car park of Slammys and starts to hope that the girl he had seen before is working today, and perhaps he could introduce her to his African-American girlfriend. He sees her in the restaurant and becomes excited. "Welcome to Slammys, may I help you?" B tells her it's good to see her again and asks if she remembers him. She does not, and asks him if there was anything he would like to order. He asks her again, and he mentions he was the guy who wanted the tissues to wipe off the bugs. She still doesn't remember. B makes his order and proceeds to try and tell her about Ingo's film. He tells her that it's an animated film. She stares blankly at him, silent. "Like a cartoon," B tells her. "I know what animated means," she tells him. He apologizes and tells her he didn't mean to imply that she didn't know what animated meant. She asks him if the film was about fire. B becomes excited by the fact that she is now engaged. He tells her that it's funny that she asks, as the film is about a lot of things, and that yes, fire is one of them. He asks if she likes films about fire. She tells B that she doesn't really. "Why'd you ask then?" She tells him since she can see that his truck is on fire and that perhaps he was bringing a film about fire back with him. B turns around to see smoke coming out from his truck. He runs for the door and hears the cashier shout, "I figured it might be like Kashao. They once asked him what he would take from a burning house." B tells her that he knows the quote and falls a little in love with her as he runs out. B tries to get inside the truck, engulfed in smoke and fire, finding it hard to breathe and trying to save as much as he can while he can. B goes into a rant to the reader, and it's implied as he's trying to save the film in the truck that he passes out from the fire.
So the video is over now, and I've left it off from Ingo and Ingo dying and the film being destroyed, and I kind of just want to leave that I just want to leave it as there, because as much as I would like to cover everything in just one video, it's a lot, and I don't want to like skip anything. I don't want to like get burnt out and feel like I've missed stuff because I'm just trying to rush through it. So I'm going to take my time with it. I don't know when the second part will come out, but I'm looking forward to continuing this, and hopefully I get better at making stuff as I'm going along. Maybe I'll, yeah, like, it might be a quality jump in the next one, maybe, I don't know, we'll see. I'm gonna work on some other stuff in the meantime. I'm also working on Sardonicos highlights. I'm running that channel, and it would be great to if you guys would subscribe to that, because we need a few more watch hours before it's monetizable, and then I'll be able to like you know, split the profits with the guys over there, and you know, like have like, you know, turn like my enjoyment of the show into, you know, like a little thing to like add, you know, like the highlights and that. It was like always something that I wanted from the channel, and I was expecting them to do it I was expecting like a highlights channel already, but it seemed like, you know, like no one else was doing it. But I guess, like, you know, I guess it's me, the one, I don't know, whatever. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'm excited to do part 2, and I hope you subscribe, and I'll be doing some other videos in between. I think I want to talk about Limitless, but I'm not going to make any promises. That movie's hilarious, and I feel like I kind of have like more to say than I did in the other video that I made that mentioned it, but we'll see. Alright, thank you very much, and goodbye.